Two cats meet in a hallway. Neither one meows. They're not ignoring each other. A tail goes straight up. Noses touch for a second. One slides along the other's flank. They both keep walking, and the entire exchange happens in silence. Adult cats have almost nothing to say to each other out loud. Kittens meow. They meow at their mother, and then they grow up and stop. The sound you hear at 6 in the morning next to an empty bowl is aimed at exactly one species, and it isn't theirs. There's no dictionary behind it. Record your cat, play the clips to a friend who's never met her, ask which one means hungry and which one means shut in the bathroom, and they'll do about as well as a coin toss. Your cat never learned cat. Your cat built a word with one speaker and one listener, and you're the listener. That puts the rest of it on the table. If the voice was invented for us, then every other thing you read as affection, the shin rub, the raised tail, the purr in your lap, has to be checked to find out who it was addressed to. Hold on to that phrase. A word with one speaker and one listener. It comes back at the end of this, and it won't mean what it means right now. If you want the next one of these, subscribe and drop a like on your way past. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there, because cats set the schedule in most houses, and I'd like to know how many of you are up at an hour your cat picked. If cats aren't using their voices on each other, what are they using? Watch a colony of free-roaming cats for long enough, and the answer is mostly quiet. At the Portsmouth dockyard, where observers logged the greetings between cats living loose around the buildings, the single most common greeting was the tail held vertical on approach. After that comes the nose-to-nose sniff, then the rub along the sides. Then, two animals sitting in contact, one licking the other's head where it can't reach itself. Add the scent work, cheeks and chin pressed to door frames and chair legs and corners, refreshed daily. Add the face, the ears, the whiskers, the pupils, a half-closed blink held a beat too long. Almost none of it makes a sound. Cats aren't mute. They hiss, they growl, they scream, and free-living cats produce long, meow-like cries in the mating season, which is the one context where adults really do call to each other. But the everyday meow belongs to a kitten. It's the sound a blind, deaf, palm-sized animal makes to a mother who also can't see it. And it means roughly, I'm here, and I'm not where I should be. It has an obvious job. When the job ends, in most cats, so does the sound. Feral cats show you the same thing from the other end. Cats born around people who never handle them stay quiet at humans. Give those same cats months of close contact, and the rate of meowing climbs. Nobody is born knowing to do this. Each cat works it out inside its own lifetime. In the early 2000s, a graduate student at Cornell decided to check how far the sound had drifted. He compared house cat meows with the calls of the African wildcat, the animal our cats descend from, and put both in front of human listeners. The house cat version came out shorter and higher. The wildcat version runs longer and flatter and lands with the force of a demand. And when volunteers rated the recordings, everybody preferred the house cat, whether they owned cats, liked cats, or had no feelings about cats whatsoever. Nobody sat down and bred cats for a nicer voice. What happened is duller and more powerful than that. Cats that produced a sound people found easy to have in the room got fed, got let in, got tolerated near the grain store, and stuck around to have kittens. Cats whose calls made people want the animal gone did less well. Run that filter for enough generations and you get a call reshaped around a human ear. Later acoustic work found the domestic cat has the widest spread of meow structures of any small wild cat sampled, while the purr, oddly, carries more information about which individual is producing it than the meow does, and the wild relatives' calls stayed narrow and stereotyped. A meow is a doorbell. A doorbell has one job, and the job is to make one particular listener stop what they're doing and walk to the door. The strange part is that nobody designed this one, so the sound is pointed at us. How good are we, actually, at receiving it? The Cornell student ran that test too. He gathered around 100 calls from a dozen cats in 5 situations: feeding time, brushing, waiting in a car, and asked volunteers to name the situation each call came from. People scored above chance. Barely. Whole strings of calls worked better than single ones, and listeners who lived with cats did a bit better than listeners who didn't. A bigger version came years afterward. 225 people listened to meows recorded in 3 ordinary situations: a cat waiting for food, a cat shut alone in an unfamiliar room, a cat being brushed. The researchers even sorted the calls first, picking the most typical example of each situation and the least typical, to give listeners the best possible shot. Accuracy never rose meaningfully above guessing. The food call did best. The isolation call did worst, which is a bleak little result when you think about it. The moment the cat is most alone is the moment we're least able to tell. Then there's the experiment that rearranges the whole thing. Owners were played meows from their own cat and from a cat they'd never met. On their own cat, they landed around 60%. On the stranger's cat, they dropped to chance. Not worse than average. Average. All that experience, worth nothing the moment the animal changed. There is no cat language. There are only private ones. 1 per household, sometimes 1 per person. Assembled from scratch every time and gone when the cat dies. Here's how one gets built. A kitten arrives with a general-purpose noise inherited from the nursery. It tries versions of that noise on you. Some get a bowl filled, some get a door opened, some get absolutely nothing and a person who keeps reading. The ones that pay off get repeated and sharpened. The ones that don't fade out. Give it a couple of years and you have a small set of signals fitted to 1 apartment and 1 human's tolerance for being woken up. And on your side, you've learned to decode a system nobody else on Earth has been trained on. 2 people inventing a code at summer camp, and then nobody else can read the notes. I'll admit that when I first saw the owner numbers, I assumed the recordings were bad. They aren't. The same experiment has been run with dogs barking in different situations, and people are far better at reading a strange dog than a strange cat. Dogs bark to the world, cats meow to an address. The voice, then, is a local invention, worked out on the spot. That leaves the body, the rub against your leg, the tail that goes up when you come home. Those feel ancient, and they feel like the cat treating you as one of its own. Both halves of that are worth testing. Start with the tail, because the tail is the part everyone reads correctly without knowing why. A cat coming toward you with its tail held vertical, sometimes with the tip curled forward and trembling, is making a specific statement, and it's making it early. That's the design of the thing. It's visible across a room. It happens before contact, while both animals still have room to change their minds. In the 1990s, a doctoral student at Southampton went looking for where the signal came from. She spent her time with captive groups of undomesticated small cats, picked to sit at different distances from the house cat on the family tree, the Indian desert cat, the jungle cat, the caracal, Geoffroy's cat. All of them are solitary in the wild. All of them, penned together, turned out to have most of the domestic cat's social behavior anyway, which was surprise enough. One thing was missing. None of them raised the tail as a friendly greeting. Her conclusion was that the raised tail is a domestic cat invention, worked out somewhere in the process of moving in with us. The only other cat that does something comparable is the lion, and the lion is the one big cat that lives in permanent groups. Then a colony in Rome got tested directly. Garbatella, a courtyard, a group of neutered cats fed by the neighborhood. Researchers showed them cardboard silhouettes of a cat, identical except for the tail, one up, one down. The cats walked toward the tail-up shape faster and often lifted their own tails in reply. To the tail-down shape, they came stiffly, low, ready for trouble. A flat, black shape with no smell and no sound was enough to run the whole exchange. The same work found the signal doesn't move evenly through a group. The lower-ranking animals produce it more often, and the higher-ranking ones receive it more often. It's the raised hand you give a driver at a crossing. I've seen you, I'm coming through, nothing sudden is about to happen. And it's what makes the next part possible. The next part is the rub. Head first, then cheek, then the whole flank drawn along, sometimes tails wrapping at the end. If both cats came in with their tails up, they usually rub at the same time. Between colony animals, it runs from the younger to the older. It can go on for minutes, often with purring underneath. For most of the last century, that rub was read as marking. The cat has scent glands on its cheeks and chin. The cat presses them against you, therefore the cat has filed you under property. Tidy, and it survived a long time on patches. Cats rub things they never returned to, which got absorbed.
Cats in a group end up smelling of each other, which got folded in as a bonus.
What eventually broke it was mundane. Cats rub with their flanks, and the flank has essentially no scent glands to deposit anything with. Both animals frequently rub at once, which isn't how you claim a thing. The smell part is real, it's just not the point. A group that rubs each other constantly ends up wearing one smell, one box of detergent for the entire household. That's why a cat can come home from the clinic and be attacked by the animal it has slept against for years. The face is the same. The smell is wrong, so the individual is gone. Get down to the height where this is happening. Your knees are at eye level. The room isn't mainly a picture. It's a map of smells laid across the floor and the corners and the legs of the furniture, updated hourly. And you are a column of moving weight 2 or 3 times the length of the animal reading you. Something that size coming through a doorway is worth signaling to while it's still far away.
So the tail goes up at distance, and the body only comes in afterward, once the tall thing has answered, or at least hasn't done anything alarming.
Which leaves one loose thread. That signal is young. It isn't in the wildcat's repertoire. It shows up in the animal that came to live with us, and that dates it. So when did the moving in actually happen? The answer, everybody knows, starts on Cyprus. Shilurokambos is a Neolithic village on a low plateau east of Limassol. Wooden huts and then stone ones, wells cut into rock, obsidian blades carried in from Anatolia. In 2001, a French team was excavating a grave there. An adult of 30 or more, body curled on its side with the knees folded, buried with a marine shell, a stone pendant, polished stone axes, a lump of ochre, flint blades. Rich for the time and place, which suggests somebody who mattered. 40 centimeters away, at the same depth, in the same sediment, the archaeologist clearing the burial found a cat,
8 months old. The whole skeleton still articulated, which means the animal went into the ground in one piece and was covered fast. No cut marks anywhere on the bones. Both bodies oriented the same way, and cats are not native to Cyprus. Somebody carried this animal across open water in a boat, and years later somebody put it in the earth beside a person 9,500 years ago. The story that hangs off that grave is the one in every book. Farming arrives, grain gets stored, rodents come for the grain, wildcats come for the rodents, and people notice the arrangement works and stop throwing stones. Thousands of years later, cats are sitting under chairs in Egyptian tomb paintings, wearing collars and earrings, and Bastet is a goddess with a cat's head, and the whole thing reads as one continuous line running from that Cypriot boat to your sofa. The weak joint in that line is the bones. Cat remains are rare in archaeological sites, and the wildcat skeleton and the house cat skeleton are nearly the same object.
Telling them apart by eye barely works. So the story rested less on what the bones were than on where they turned up. Bones near people, therefore cats living with people, therefore the beginning of the animal we have now. In 2025, that assumption got checked properly. A team sequenced 87 cat genomes, most of them from archaeological material spanning about 11,000 years, plus higher quality genomes from modern and museum wildcats out of Italy, Bulgaria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Then they asked which of those ancient European cats belonged to the domestic lineage at all. Almost none of them. Everything in Europe older than roughly 2,000 years came back as European wildcat, a different species from the North African animal our cats descend from.
The domestic cat arrives later than that, out of North Africa, spreading along the sea routes of the classical world.
The cats in those early European graves aren't your cat's ancestors. They were wild animals living around a settlement. That's a real relationship, and an old one, and the Cypress cat was tamed enough that somebody buried it like a person. It's a different story from the one it's been used to tell, and the domestic cat's own family tree turns out to have a stranger in the oldest photograph. The picture still has holes. Ancient DNA from North Africa is thin, and Egypt's exact role stays open. The place where cats end up mummified by the 100,000 might be where the process started, or might be where it finished, and nobody can currently say which. There's a second measurement that fits the first uncomfortably well. When the domestic cat genome was compared against wildcat genomes, the differences came out modest. A handful of regions, around 13 genes, carry the signature of selection since domestication. They cluster in a suggestive place: fear conditioning, memory, and learning that links a stimulus to a reward.
The animals that stayed were the ones that panicked less with a human standing close, and that formed the connection between people and food faster.
Cats are still described in the literature as only semi-domesticated, and the reasons are all in plain sight. They interbreed with wildcats wherever the ranges overlap. They hunt exactly the way their wild relatives hunt. For most of the time we've had them, nobody controlled their breeding at all. So when your cat lifts its tail at you in the hallway, it hasn't had 10,000 years of practice at living with you. Depending on where you are, it may have had a fifth of that. And the traits that changed over that stretch were about staying put and not bolting. Reading us was never on the list. 12 cats and 12 dogs, 1 person each, 2 hours a day for 6 months. That's a lot of time to spend with an animal before you ask it anything. This was a lab setup in the mid-2000s.
All of them learned the same apparatus, a box where you go to one of 2 pictures and get paid for it. And they got good at it, running through pattern and object problems until choosing between 2 images was routine. Then the real test, and it had a trick in it. 4 pairs of images, and this time both pictures paid, every trial, whichever one the animal picked. Nothing could be learned during the test. All that was left was what the animal already knew. The first pair was the handler's face against a stranger's face. The dogs went to their own person almost every time. The cats picked their handler 54% of the time, which in a 2-way choice is what you get from an animal walking in with nothing. The easy move here is to blame the cats. Bad subjects, bad data, everyone knows how this goes. It doesn't hold because of what the same animals did on the other 3 pairs. Given the face of a cat they lived with against a cat they'd never seen, they took the familiar one about 90% of the time. Given a natural scene they'd been shown before against one they hadn't, they were nearly as good. They could tell 2 lawns apart. They could not tell you from a stranger. Handle that carefully. 12. Animals a species is small. It was written up as a conference report rather than a full paper, and nobody seems to have repeated it at scale. It's a strong hint standing on thin evidence. The hint does fit the hardware. A cat's eyes are enormous for the size of its skull, proportionally far larger than ours, and that buys the low-light performance everybody admires. The bill comes due on focus. The lens is big and doesn't flex much, so the band where a cat pulls an image sharp is narrow and it doesn't reach inward. Below roughly 25 centimeters, nothing resolves. The treat you're holding under its nose is a blur. Your face, when you lean down into it, is a warm, pale smear with 2 dark patches near the top. It's a page pressed against your nose, held there and never moved back. That's what the whiskers are doing on the muzzle, above the eyes, and along the backs of the front legs. An animal that has just pinned something under its paws needs to know what it's holding, and it can't see it. Up close, a cat runs on touch and smell. So what does reach you? Start with your voice. 20 cats in Tokyo heard recordings of 3 strangers calling the cat's name, then the owner's voice doing the same. The cats discriminated cleanly. The interesting part is the shape of the response, an ear rotating, a head turning. That was the whole reply. No approach, no answering call,
not even a tail movement, and it made no difference that the last voice belonged to the person who feeds them. The cat registers you and files it. Now smell.
30 cats were offered plastic tubes holding cotton swabs. The owners taken from the armpit, behind the ear and between the toes. A stranger's collected the same way, and an empty tube. The cats spent far longer working on the stranger's tube. They also led with the right nostril on the unfamiliar smell and switched to the left as it stopped being new. Your own smell is the one that doesn't need checking. And then space, which is the strangest of the three. A team in Kyoto put one speaker outside a room the cat knew well and another inside it, as far from the first as the room allowed, then left the cat alone. The owner's voice called the cat's name 5 times from the far speaker outside. A moment later, the owner's voice called once more from the speaker inside the room. The cats reacted most in exactly that condition, the one where the person had apparently crossed the house in an instant. Swap in another cat's voice or a sound that isn't a voice, and the reaction disappears. A phone ringing from a room you know is empty.
That's what you are, from down there. An outline you know across a room, dissolving when you lean in.
A walk identifiable through a wall. A smell so established it isn't worth sniffing. And a voice with coordinates attached, tracked so precisely that hearing it in the wrong place is worth getting up for. All of that is you. None of it is your face. There's one signal running the other way, though, one the cat sends rather than receives, and it lands on people who have never lived with a cat in their lives. It got studied because of one animal in one bedroom. A behavioral ecologist at Sussex who had spent years on elephants, red deer and lions was being woken every morning by her own cat, a tom called Peppo. And what caught her attention wasn't the fact of being woken, it was that the purring was unpleasant. Something inside, a sound she associated with contentment, was making it impossible to ignore. Getting the recordings was the hard part. Cats wouldn't produce this purr with a researcher in the room. It shows up mainly in houses where one cat has one person's undivided attention, and it happens in private, at antisocial hours. So the owners were trained to run the equipment themselves and record their own cats in their own bedrooms. 10 cats, 2 contexts each, purring while working on a human for food, and purring while resting or being stroked. All clips leveled to the same volume. 50 listeners rated them. The food purrs came back more urgent and less pleasant, and people who had never owned a cat heard it just as clearly, which kills any explanation built on household habit. Owners were a little more accurate, nothing more. Then the acoustics. Buried inside the low rumble sat a high, voiced peak with no business being there. A cry, a small meow folded into the purr, sitting in the frequency range of a human infant. The team resynthesized the same purrs with that one component removed and everything else untouched. The urgency ratings fell. Take out the cry and the sound becomes ignorable. It's a smoke alarm chirping under music. You can't name what's wrong with it. You just can't leave it alone. Nothing about this is a plan. A cat that meows at 5 in the morning gets carried out and the door shut. A cat that purrs gets to stay on the bed and gets fed sooner and does it again tomorrow. The behavior develops in one-to-one relationships because that's exactly where that kind of shaping works. And purrs carry a stronger individual signature than meows do, so what comes through the bedroom door in the morning isn't a generic cat noise. It has one animal's fingerprints on it and one person's name. Here's what makes it stranger. Nobody is sure how a purr is made. From the 1970s, the textbook answer was active muscle contraction. The brain fires rhythmic bursts, the laryngeal muscles twitch dozens of times a second, the airflow gets chopped into a rumble. Direct evidence was always thin, and the explanation survived half a century anyway, partly because it made a clean prediction. No nerves, no purr. In 2023, someone tested the prediction the only way it can be tested. 8 larynges, taken from cats euthanized for terminal illness with their owner's consent, mounted in a rig with warm air pushed through them.
No brain, no nerve supply, no muscle activity of any kind. All 8 produced self-sustaining vibration in the purring range, first try. Inside the tissue, they found pads of connective tissue embedded in the vocal folds. Anatomists had seen them before, and nobody knew what they were for. They seem to weight the folds enough that an animal this small can vibrate them this slowly, in the same creaking register a human voice drops into at the very bottom of its range when you run out of air at the end of a sentence. It isn't a clean kill. A biomechanist who works on purring pointed out that a larynx on a bench has stopped being a cat, and that pulling the mouthpiece off a wind instrument and blowing through it tells you less about the instrument than you'd hope. The authors accept that both mechanisms may be running together in a live animal. 50 years of consensus, and the honest position now is that the most familiar sound in your house is not fully explained. Cats purr in labor. Cats purr on the exam table at the vet. Vets watch it constantly, and it fools owners constantly. The purr was never a happiness meter. Purring tracks something looser. A cat that wants a situation to continue or wants to get through one. Kittens are doing it at 2 days old, blind and deaf, with the mother purring back. Some mornings there's something on the doormat that used to be alive. Everybody has heard the explanation. Mother cats bring prey back to the nest, first dead, then injured, then alive, so the kittens can practice on it before they have to do it themselves. Scale that up to a household and you get the version people repeat at dinner. Your cat has assessed you, concluded you're the worst hunter it has ever met, and started remedial classes.
It's a lovely story. It's also a hypothesis nobody has tested. It rests on a resemblance between 2 situations, and resemblance isn't evidence. The dollar explanation covers more ground. A small predator that has caught something carries it to the safest place in its range and eats it there, or stores it and comes back. That's standard for cats living wild, and your house is the safest place in this cat's range. The bed isn't a plate, it's a pantry, and the shopping goes in the fridge rather than to a neighbor. The catch usually isn't food anyway. Cats hunt when they're full, and the sequence runs on separate wiring from hunger, which is why a cat will leave a full bowl to chase something across a room. When the Exeter group ran isotope analysis on the whiskers of cats that hunted regularly, wild prey turned out to be a tiny slice of what those animals were living on. Almost everything came out of a bag their owners bought, which is what made the next experiment possible. 219 households in southwest England, 12 weeks, owners logging every animal brought home. Some cats got a bell, some got a bright collar cover. Some got their usual food through a puzzle feeder. Some were switched to a grain-free food where the protein came from meat. Some got 5 to 10 minutes a day of wand play, ending with a toy mouse they were allowed to bite and kick, so the sequence finished with a kill. The meat food cut prey brought home by 36%. The play cut it as well, by rather less. The bells did nothing measurable overall, and the puzzle feeder, meant to occupy the cat, pushed the numbers up instead, which nobody had predicted and nobody has fully explained. Read those results back and the picture inverts. The interventions that worked didn't stop the cat from hunting, they reduced how much the cat wanted to. One group's appetite dropped when the food got better. The others dropped when they got to run the whole sequence indoors. Nothing was confiscated. The measure has a hole in it, and the researchers said so. Prey brought home is not prey killed, and a cat could be leaving more outside. Still, the direction is hard to argue with. So much for the gift. The bond itself is where the field gets properly uncomfortable. Book a room the cat has never been in. Bring the owner. 2 minutes together, 2 minutes with the cat alone, 2 minutes when the owner comes back. Film all 6. Then hand the footage to coders who classify what happens on reunion using the same criteria developed for human infants and later applied to dogs. Secure looks like this. The animal greets, settles, and goes back to exploring, using the person as a base to work from. Insecure looks like clinging without moving, or pointedly not approaching, or coming forward and retreating in the same motion. In 2007, a team ran a version of that on cats and reported attachment.
In 2015, a group at Lincoln rebuilt it with the controls the first one lacked. The important one being full counterbalancing, so every cat did the procedure in both orders, and nobody could confuse a bond with the effect of who happened to leave first. 20 cat and owner pairs. The cats vocalized more when the owner left than when the stranger left. That was the entire difference. Everything else attachment predicts failed to appear, and the vocalizing, they argued, could be frustration rather than distress. Their conclusion was blunt. The earlier claim didn't survive proper controls. In 2019, a lab in Oregon ran the short version on kittens and adults and found the opposite. About 65% of the cats classified as securely attached, which is almost exactly the figure for human infants, and higher than the rate reported for pet dogs. They retested the kittens after a 6-week training and socialization course, and nothing moved.
Whatever the style was, it had already set. Same test, same 6 minutes of cat. 2 thermometers in the same soup, 20 degrees apart. In my view, this is the most interesting failure in the whole field, because both readings are defensible. There's a real objection sitting under the disagreement. An unfamiliar room is frightening for a cat, and a frightened cat produces no readable behavior at all. It goes under a chair and stops. Code that how you like. It's also why cats keep escaping the science itself. In the study comparing cats and dogs on human pointing, 5 dogs had to be thrown out of the analysis because the cats living in the same households quit partway through. The lead researcher said afterward he was done working with the species and reckoned you have to test 3 cats to get a result on 1. A later team in Budapest started with 99 cats for a gaze experiment and finished with usable data from 41. Cats went under sofas. Cats wriggled out of the arms of owners who were holding them and left. Which brings us to 2025 and the greenest attempt yet to settle it. If the objection is stress, remove the stress. So a Hungarian group tested therapy cats, animals selected and trained for animal-assisted work, the calmest and most people-tolerant cats anyone can produce, who show about as little strain in a strange room as a dog does. 15 of them, with ordinary companion cats as controls. They found no sign of attachment in either group, and the argument they published with it cuts deeper than the result. Attachment is a dependency bond. It evolved in animals whose young die without a caregiver, which is why the test works on human infants and on dogs. A solitary hunter that can feed itself, defend a range and raise kittens without any human involvement was never under that pressure. So the flat result may not be a failure to detect the bond. It may be the answer to a question the animal was never built to be asked. I've been walking you towards something for the past half hour, and I want to stop and look at where it actually lands. The case I've been building is the one you'll find in most books on this subject. The cat never worked out that we're a different species, so it points old feline hardware at the nearest large warm object, and we read the result as love. Tail, rub, purr, dead mouse. A solitary hunter running its ancestral routine at a target that happens to be us. I don't think that survives contact with the last few years of work. Start with 16 cats in a dormitory outside Paris. They belonged to students at the veterinary school there, and the researcher had given up on labs entirely. She converted a common room instead, filled it with toys and hiding places and a litter tray, and let the owner sit silently beside the cat while a speaker did the talking. 5 recorded phrases, ordinary household ones, asking about play or a treat. The first 3 were recorded in the register the owner uses on other adults. The 4th was the register the owner uses on the cat, the high, short, repetitive one everybody slips into and pretends they don't. The 5th went back to adult. The cats followed the pattern exactly. Interest fell away across the first 3 phrases, the way it falls away from anything repeated. On the 4th, it jumped straight back up. On the 5th, it collapsed again. Then the same procedure with a stranger's voice doing the identical thing. Interest fell and stayed down, and the cat-directed register from an unfamiliar person produced nothing at all. Dogs tested the same way,
Brighten for anybody who talks to them like a dog. These cats brightened for one person. The researchers' own caveat matters. These were indoor animals who met almost no strangers, so this may be a fact about experience rather than a hard ceiling. But the shape of the result is hard to talk your way around.
The cat isn't responding to a pitch. It's responding to a specific voice using a specific register aimed at it. 3 things have to line up, which is not how a reflex works. Now the eyes, which is the finding that made the rounds and got softened on the way. About 20 cats, 14 households. The owner sits about a meter away, and when the cat looks over, produces the sequence. A run of half blinks, then a long narrowing held for at least half a second. Against a control where the owner simply sits in the room and does nothing, the cats returned more half blinks and more narrowing. In a second experiment, a researcher the cat had never met either kept a neutral face or offered the same sequence, then extended a flat hand. The cats came to the hand more readily after the blink. That got turned into a piece of internet folklore about telling your cat you love it. The follow-up work is less comfortable. Shelter cats who returned more and longer eye closures were rehomed faster, and the cats who spent the most time producing the sequence were the ones staff had flagged as nervous around people and in need of desensitizing. So the signal may live in 2 contexts at once, one friendly and one appeasing. A cat blinking slowly at you might be at ease. It might also be managing you. There's a plainer demonstration that cats read us, and it involves an electric fan. Researchers tied plastic ribbons to the blades, set it going in the room, and told owners to look at it and either speak calmly and pleasantly or act alarmed. Most of the cats looked back and forth between the strange object and their owner's face before deciding anything. Cats whose owners performed fear were more likely to start moving toward the exit. At conversational distance, with posture and voice available, a cat gets a great deal from us. The picture only goes soft up close, where the face fills the field. And when cats are offered a straight choice, the results embarrass the reputation. 50 animals, half from homes and half from a shelter, kept away from food, toys, scent, and human contact for a few hours first. Each was offered 3 options in every category, then the winner of each category all at once. The favorite food, the favorite toy, the favorite smell, and a person. Half the cats went to the person. Food came second. 6 of them declined to engage with anything whatsoever, which is the most cat result in the entire literature. There's one more piece that never fitted the big, clumsy cat story anyway, and it's been sitting in plain sight since the courtyard in Rome. The raised tail travels upward through a group, from the animal with less standing toward the animal with more. Whatever slot we occupy, it isn't pure. Some researchers read that as cats treating us as dominant. Others point out that rank in cat colonies is unstable and predicts almost nothing, and prefer to describe the human as a caregiver. Either way, the claim that cats behave toward us exactly as they behave toward other cats was an interpretation of an observation. Nobody ever measured it. So the sentence I set up at the start is wrong, and I'd rather say so than defend it. The cat didn't confuse you with a cat. It kept the inherited signals, the tail and the rub and the shared household smell. Then it built a second set on top of them, a call it doesn't use on its own kind. A purr shaped around a reflex of ours, a private vocabulary fitted to one kitchen, and an ear that snaps around for one voice in one register. None of that second set exists anywhere else in the species. All of it gets assembled inside a single lifetime. The second channel is only as wide as what we can receive on our end, and our end turns out to be narrow. In 2019, a team at Guelph put that to the internet directly. They collected short clips of cats, mostly from video sites, each a few seconds long and cropped tight on eyes, muzzle, and mouth with the body out of frame. Half showed animals in situations they had sought out, being stroked or given something. Half showed animals with health problems or trying to leave. Obvious fear was deliberately left out, no bared teeth, no flattened ears, because everybody already reads those. Then they asked people to judge each clip as positive, negative, or unsure. 6,300 people from 85 countries took it.
The average score landed just above chance. 13% did well enough that the researchers nicknamed them the cat whisperers. Vets and veterinary technicians were heavily overrepresented in it. Women scored better than men, younger adults better than older ones. The variable that did nothing was the one everybody would put money on.
Almost everyone who took it had lived with a cat as an adult. It bought them nothing. That's the same shape as the meow result from earlier. You can learn one animal in detail and it refuses to generalize to the species. That leaves an obvious question about what all the facial machinery is for if it isn't pointed at us. An anthropology undergraduate in Los Angeles answered it by turning up at a cat cafe after closing time. The place is a non-profit lounge where visitors sit with adoptable cats, around 50 adult shorthairs living as a group. She came in when the visitors had gone and filmed the residents interacting with each other on and off for the better part of a year. What she ended up with was under 200 minutes of usable tape and 186 recorded encounters between cats. Then came the part that sounds unbearable. Every facial movement in that footage was coded by hand, using a system built specifically for cat anatomy that requires passing a certification exam before you're allowed to use it. Movement by movement, ear by ear. The count came back at 26 distinct facial muscle movements. Ears rotating, ears flapping, blinks and half blinks, pupils opening and closing, lips parting, mouth corners drawn back, nose licks, whiskers pushed forward or folded in. Combined a few at a time, those movements produced 276 structurally distinct signals, every one of them directed at another cat. Just under half turned up only in friendly encounters, a bit over a third only in hostile ones. That puts a supposedly antisocial animal in the same range as a chimpanzee for sheer facial vocabulary, and the researchers were careful to add that they have no idea what most of the signals mean. This is where that earlier result stops being strange. The cats had no trouble at all picking out a familiar cat's face. Of course they didn't. That's the band the equipment was built for. The aloof reputation is largely a measurement error on our side. The animal is not unexpressive. The traffic is dense and constant, and it runs on a frequency our receiver doesn't cover. We've been standing next to it for centuries, concluding there's nothing on the air. Sit with the whole arrangement for a second. It's a strange one. Two species share a sofa. Each one broadcasts most of its social signal on a channel the other can't decode, and each one takes the fragment that does get through and treats it as the whole message. We get the invented call, the tail, the rumble in the lap. We call that the cat. The cat gets a walk, a voice with coordinates and a smell, and calls that us. Both of us are working from a heavily edited transcript, and neither of us knows it. None of this stays abstract for long. If the average person reads a cat's face at chance, then a cat that's in pain in an ordinary living room is very likely to be missed. And the cats in that study who were flagged as distressed were being missed by people who loved them. The reason vets scored well is not a gift. It's volume. They see hundreds of cats a year and get corrected by the outcome. It's a trainable skill, which is a more useful conclusion than any amount of talk about the mysterious feline soul. And underneath all of it sits something that doesn't get said often enough. None of this accumulates. Every private vocabulary, every negotiated blink, every sound that gets a door opened has to be built again from nothing. No cat inherits any of it. Every cat starts from zero. A word with one speaker and one listener is the smallest language that can exist, and there are hundreds of millions of them running tonight, each one due to end with the animal that made it. The question people actually bring to this is whether their cat loves them, and I don't think the evidence settles that in either direction. What it does show is narrower and considerably stranger. Here is an animal that was never shaped by selection to need you, out of a lineage that hunts alone and dies alone. It has assembled a channel it uses on nobody else on Earth and pointed it at one person. The mistake we keep making with it is a simple one. A signal arrives, we happen to be standing there, and we assume it was addressed to us. Some of what your cat does is exactly that.
Old machinery aimed at nothing in particular, and we walk into the beam and take it personally. And some of it is aimed at you with a precision that took years to develop. From the sofa, the two look identical. That's the uncomfortable part, and no amount of affection for the animal makes it go away. The honest position is that you live with something you can only partly read, which is also true of the animal reading you back. The gap doesn't close. It gets narrower with attention, and attention is the whole of it. Watch the ears, watch the whiskers. Notice which sound gets used only when you're the one in the room.
Tonight, somewhere in your house, an animal that cannot see your face clearly will know exactly where you are from the sound of you moving through it. And when it wants something, it will use a noise it invented, that its own species has no use for, that it has never tried on anyone else, and that would mean nothing to your neighbor. You're the only one who understands it. That isn't nothing. If this was worth your time, a like and a subscribe help more than you'd guess.